What was it about a simple 10-second video, filmed at Dallas divided by Fort Worth International Airport by a Chinese businessman, that caused it to explode across the globe in the blink of an eye, racking up 12 million views? What astonished the man who filmed it most wasn't the video's content, but the unified chorus of comments pouring in from every corner of the world. You'd never see this in China. How is it that only America can do this? What exactly did he capture, and why did it leave the world so stunned? Let's find out. Li Wei, 45, was a senior partner at a leading Shanghai-based private equity firm. With an annual income equivalent to over $750,000 USD and a life spent crisscrossing the globe, airports were his second office. The best airport in the world? Shanghai Pudong, of course, he would state with unshakable conviction. Indeed, with its futuristic design and staggering efficiency, Pudong International was a global aviation powerhouse, serving over 76 million passengers a year. Li Wei took immense pride in the gleaming infrastructure that China's economic miracle had built. An airport in Texas will be just like one in Kansas or Ohio, I suppose, he had remarked to a colleague before his trip. America's GDP was still larger than China's, but its best days were behind it, he believed. The real reason for his condescension, however, stemmed from a humiliating experience at a major American airport just last year. His suitcase had been thrown so carelessly by a baggage handler that a priceless antique tea set inside had shattered. When he complained, the agent had merely shrugged. That's just how it is in America, he thought. That experience had only hardened his prejudice. As his plane began its descent into DFW, Li Wei allowed himself a smirk. On this business trip, he would show these Texans the true power and efficiency of the Chinese model. The project at hand was a massive merger and acquisition deal with an American tech firm. The idea of implementing a streamlined, top-down Chinese business model in the heart of America was, to him, the perfect challenge. Americans, he thought, were too focused on individual feelings and pointless pleasantries, losing sight of the bottom line. In the World Economic Forum's global competitiveness rankings, China was steadily climbing, while America's position seemed to stagnate. To Li Wei, these numbers told the whole story. Even as a flight attendant warmly explained some Texan customs, his expression remained coolly detached. Politeness doesn't boost profits, he mused. Results are all that matter. As the plane taxied to the gate, a sense of superiority swelled within him. He pictured the American executives, soon to capitulate before the undeniable force of Chinese capital. He had no idea that the reality he was about to encounter would fundamentally alter his entire worldview. The moment the aircraft doors opened at DFW, Li Wei's life-changing experience began. Stepping into the terminal, he felt a subtle sense of disorientation. The floors were exceptionally clean, polished to a mirror shine. Must have just opened this wing, he thought. On his way to immigration, Li Wei instinctively glanced at his watch. At this time of day at Pudong, the lines would be immense, a testament to its sheer volume. But the immigration hall at DFW was moving with a surprising fluidity. Probably just fewer travelers, he concluded, holding on to his assumptions. But it was at the baggage claim carousel that the first crack appeared in his rigid mindset. As the bags emerged, he watched the handlers lift them off the belt. They were meticulously arranging each piece of luggage. What are they doing? He wondered. This was a sight unheard of in China, where handlers simply tossed bags onto the carousel with no regard for their orientation. But here at DFW, the staff were turning every suitcase so the handle faced outward, making it effortless for passengers to grab their bags. How inefficient. A complete waste of time, Li Wei muttered, frowning. In his value system, such an act was incomprehensible. The foundation of modern Chinese business was temporal efficiency. Every minute, every second, directly impacted the bottom line. But a greater confusion awaited him. On his way to the exit, Li Wei got lost. The signage at DFW was multilingual, but to someone accustomed to the stark, character-based signs of Shanghai, the detailed English instructions felt cluttered. "Excuse me," he asked a nearby airport employee in English. "Which way to the taxi stand?" The employee, a man whose English was clear and friendly, tried to explain. But seeing that verbal directions might not be enough, he did something that shocked Li Wei. The employee started walking, gesturing for Li Wei to follow, personally guiding him toward the taxi area. "Oh, that's really not necessary," Li Wei said, feeling a wave of awkwardness. In China, an airport employee would never personally escort a passenger like this. Their job was to perform their designated task and nothing more. Services beyond that scope were for a fee. But the DFW employee just smiled. "It's no trouble at all, sir. Making our guests feel comfortable is our job." An unexplainable feeling bloomed in Li Wei's chest. This man gained nothing from this. Why was he going to such lengths for a stranger? It was an act that the ruthless pragmatism of his world could not compute. When they reached the taxi stand, the employee tipped his hat politely and departed. Li Wei stood there alone for a moment. What was this feeling? It was a mix of confusion and a strange warmth. He shook it off. This was no time for sentimentality. In the world of business, efficiency is righteousness. Getting into the taxi, he tried to reaffirm his initial impressions by quizzing the driver. "Are the staff always so helpful at this airport?" The driver answered as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Oh, sure. Putting the customer first is just how we do things round here, isn't it?" Li Wei's confusion only deepened. After checking into his hotel, he began reviewing his documents for the next day's negotiation. He couldn't find the main presentation folder. He remembered packing it in his checked luggage. A terrible thought flashed through his mind. He frantically tore through his suitcases, but the folder was nowhere to be found. Tomorrow's negotiation was critical to his career. If this deal succeeded, a promotion to managing director of North American operations was all but guaranteed. But without that presentation, the talks were dead on arrival. "Damn it! Just like that other American airport," Li Wei seethed, trembling with rage. The nightmare he'd experienced before in the US came rushing back. Lost items, indifferent staff, and finally, helpless resignation. He was convinced all American airports were the same. The next morning, he called DFW's Lost and Found department. "I'm looking for a critical file folder. I arrived last night." The agent on the other end listened patiently and replied, "I'll look into it immediately, sir. Please give us about 30 minutes. Li Wei was ready to give up. In China, an inquiry like this could take hours, if it was resolved at all. In America, he expected it to be even worse. But he was wrong. The phone rang in just 20 minutes. "Sir, we've located your folder," the agent said, her voice filled with genuine relief. "Really?" Li Wei couldn't hide his astonishment. "Yes, sir. It was found under a seat during last night's cabin cleaning, and it was logged and secured here immediately." When Li Wei rushed to the airport, an employee had his documents waiting, perfectly preserved. The folder was pristine. Not a single page was missing. "Thank you so much." "You have no idea how much this helps," he said, but the employee's next words left him speechless. "We were actually arranging for a courier to bring it to your hotel, sir. We apologize for making you take the trouble to come all the way out here." Li Wei was completely baffled. He had lost the documents through his own carelessness, yet the airport employee was apologizing to him, and they were going to deliver it? This was a level of service that simply did not exist in his world. "Why would you do all this for me?" Li Wei couldn't help but ask. The employee looked slightly embarrassed before replying, "Well, when we're entrusted with a customer's important belongings, it's our responsibility to see them safely returned. Besides, how could we just leave a guest in distress?" That unexplainable feeling welled up inside Li Wei again. This employee had no obligation to do any of this. Why did she care so much, with no prospect of personal gain or reward? Why sacrifice her time for a stranger? "We're just so glad we could help," she said, and her smile seemed to come from a place of deep, sincere relief, as if his good fortune was her own. In the taxi on the way to his meeting, Li Wei thought deeply. What he had experienced in the last 24 hours was something his value system couldn't process. It was the antithesis of efficiency and pragmatism, yet it left him with an undeniably positive feeling. "Maybe I'm missing something important," he thought. But he pushed the thought away. "Don't get emotional." In business, results are everything, he told himself, resolving to prove the superiority of the ruthlessly efficient Chinese model in the upcoming negotiation. The negotiation went more smoothly than expected. Li Wei's presentation was flawless, and the American executives listened with keen interest. "By implementing our system, you can reduce costs by 30% and halve your workforce," he stated. The American team seemed intrigued by the hard numbers. But toward the end of the meeting, an unexpected question arose. "And what happens to the employees' jobs? Have you factored in the human cost of those layoffs?" one of the executives asked. Li Wei chuckled internally. In business, it is standard practice to cut away inefficient parts. This is what leads to corporate growth. But the faces of the American team grew somber. "We consider our employees family, Mr. Li. We can't just throw them away." Li Wei didn't understand. Mixing sentiment with business was illogical. Emotion doesn't grow a company. To win in the global arena, efficiency is essential. The result was a stalemate. The American team said they would take it under consideration, but Li Wei knew that was a polite refusal. On the way back to his hotel, he couldn't hide his frustration. These Americans are impossible to understand. They haven't caught up to global standards. But the next day's events would confuse him even more. In the hotel lobby, he ran into a young engineer from the American company he had just negotiated with. "Mr. Li, good morning," the man said with a friendly nod. "Thank you for your presentation yesterday." Li Wei was instantly on guard, expecting a sarcastic jab after the rejection. But what happened next was the complete opposite. "Actually, I wanted to give you a better sense of our culture. If you have some free time, I'd like to invite you to tour our facility." Li Wei was perplexed. They had just rejected his proposal, so why invite him for a tour? There had to be a catch. "I'm not particularly interested," he replied coolly. But the young engineer persisted. "The efficiency you spoke of is important, Mr. Li. But we have our own kind of efficiency. If you see it, I believe you might discover something new." Ultimately, Li Wei's curiosity got the better of him, and he agreed. But in his heart, his conviction remained strong. "I'll just see some inefficient, folksy American management style," he thought. This might be a good chance to reconfirm China's superiority. On the day of the tour, Li Wei was taken aback. The atmosphere at the American company was completely different from what he knew. The relationships between employees were as close as a real family, but in Li Wei's eyes, it was a picture of inefficiency. How could such a coddling environment possibly create a competitive edge, he thought with a cynical sneer. While touring the factory floor, he saw workers meticulously maintaining their own machinery. In China, this kind of work would be outsourced to the lowest bidder. A total lack of cost consciousness, he concluded. At the cafeteria during lunch, he was even more surprised. Executives and line workers sat together at the same tables. This was unheard of in China's hierarchical corporate culture. How could you maintain discipline in an organization without a clear class divide? But that evening, an event occurred that shattered his value system. A small accident happened on the factory floor. An employee suffered a minor injury. But the American company's response left Li Wei speechless. The moment the accident occurred, the factory's atmosphere shifted. There was none of the chaos Li Wei expected. Instead, he witnessed a response that was astonishingly calm and systematic. The nearest employees began administering first aid, while another called for an ambulance, and a third contacted the injured worker's family. It's probably just following a manual, Li Wei thought initially. Chinese factories had emergency procedures too, but what happened next was beyond his imagination. When the plant manager arrived on the scene, the first thing he did was apologize to the injured worker. "I'm so sorry. This happened because of my poor oversight." In China, the first step would be to determine who was at fault and assess legal risk. An emotional apology like this was a dangerously admission of liability. But the manager's apology was visibly heartfelt. What was even more surprising was what happened after. Once the injured worker was on his way to the hospital, the manager gathered all the employees. "This accident was a result of a flaw in our safety management. Starting tomorrow, we will review every single work process. We will never let this happen again." Li Wei was utterly confused. The accident was caused by the worker's own carelessness. Why was the manager taking responsibility? In China, this would have been handled as a matter of individual error. But what he understood even less was the reaction of the other employees. No one blamed the manager. On the contrary, he heard people saying, "We all should have been more careful. To have the entire organization share responsibility like this. It's so inefficient," Li Wei mumbled to himself. But the scene he witnessed the next day delivered the final, decisive blow to his value system. When he returned to the factory, the worker who had been injured the day before was back at his post, a bandage on his arm. "Why aren't you resting?" Li Wei asked. "You're entitled to paid sick leave and compensation, aren't you?" The worker looked uncomfortable. "I caused everyone so much trouble. How could I stay home? It's just a small injury. I can still do paperwork." The answer left Li Wei speechless. In China, it was common sense to maximize your paid leave. It was a worker's right. But this man chose responsibility over his rights. Even more astonishing was the behavior of the other employees. They had naturally divided the injured man's physical tasks among themselves. No one complained. Instead, they asked him, "Are you sure you're okay? Don't push yourself." What is this? Li Wei was in turmoil, prioritizing the group's welfare over individual gain, valuing responsibility over rights. This was the complete opposite of the business theory he had mastered. During a lunch break, he asked the young engineer who was guiding him, "Why is everyone so devoted to the company? They could be looking out for themselves more." The young man thought for a moment before answering, "The company supports our lives, so it's only natural for us to support the company. When we help each other out, everyone is happier in the end." Li Wei still didn't fully understand, but when he was shown the company's performance data, his confusion intensified. Compared to hyper-efficient Chinese firms, their productivity was not the least bit inferior. In fact, their employee retention rate was astonishingly high, and their product quality was demonstrably better. It must be a fluke. They're just having a good run, Li Wei told himself. But deep down, another feeling was taking root. What if what he believed to be efficiency was merely a surface-level concept? What if true efficiency lay somewhere much deeper? That question planted itself quietly in his mind. On the day of his departure, Li Wei was at DFW Airport with a complex mix of feelings. His week-long stay had shaken his convictions about America to their core, but he still couldn't fully accept it. Ultimately, the Chinese model is the global standard. This place is just an exception, he told himself as he walked to the check-in counter. But then, an unexpected problem occurred. A system error meant his reservation couldn't be confirmed. "We're so sorry for the inconvenience, sir. The system is taking some time to recover," the counter agent said, bowing her head apologetically. Li Wei's frustration began to mount. This kind of thing happened in China too, but it usually ended with a curt, "It's a system problem." But DFW's response was completely different. "We deeply apologize for the trouble, sir. I'll have a manager come and assist you personally." A few minutes later, the actions of the manager who appeared made Li Wei's eyes widen. She was a middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform. "My name is Sarah," she said. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused by our system failure." Sarah offered a deep, formal apology. In China, a manager would never come out and apologize directly like this. But what followed was even more astounding. "As a token of our apology, we will be upgrading you to first class and would like to offer you this voucher for your next trip." Li Wei was flabbergasted. The system error was the airline's fault, not the airport's. Why was DFW taking such responsibility? The airport and the airline are separate companies, aren't they? "Why are you doing so much for me?" Sarah replied with a small smile. "To our customers, the airport and the airline are both just America. We all share the hope that our guests have a wonderful journey. The distinction between our organizations doesn't matter." Her words hit Li Wei like a thunderbolt. In China, the scope of an organization's responsibility was rigidly defined. Minding one's own business was a cardinal rule. But Sarah had just crossed organizational boundaries, prioritizing the customer's satisfaction above all else. While waiting in the first-class lounge, Li Wei reflected on the events of the past week. The kind airport employee who walked him to the taxi stand. The lost and found staff who were about to deliver his lost item. The American company that treated its employees like family. The factory where everyone shared responsibility for an accident. And now, this manager who worked for the customer, ignoring corporate boundaries. The common thread in all of it was a heart that thought of others. It seemed to defy efficiency and pragmatism, yet it produced the best possible outcome. Perhaps this is America's true strength, he thought. As boarding time approached, Li Wei irresistibly took out his smartphone. He wanted to capture a video of Sarah's service, but his motivation was completely different from before. Initially, he might have done it to mock what he saw as excessive American service. Now, he wanted to introduce this wonderful service to the world. When he asked Sarah for permission to film, she replied with a little embarrassment, "I'm just doing my job, sir, but if you think it would be helpful, please, go ahead." The resulting video was only 10 seconds long. It showed Sarah meticulously handling a bag and sending off a customer with a warm smile. It was a simple scene, but to Li Wei, he knew that this ordinary sight represented the true power of this country. As he boarded the plane, he whispered to himself, "I was so wrong. I completely overlooked the most important thing," and he resolved to share this video with the world. Upon returning to Shanghai, Li Wei immediately posted the video on social media with the caption, "Is this real? A 10-second video from DFW Airport." He poured his true feelings into the comments. "I completely misunderstood America. The employee in this video isn't doing anything special. She is simply thinking of the customer from the bottom of her heart. But I've come to realize that this is America's true power. The video spread like wildfire. It surpassed 1 million views in a single day and hit 12 million within a week. The comments that flooded in from around the world were more than Li Wei had ever imagined. You would never see this at an airport in China. So this is American service. It's not just surface-level politeness. You can feel the genuine care. How is it that only America can do this? Particularly moving were comments from airport staff in other countries. We want to be like this, too. We had forgotten that we need to care for our customers. I'm going to change my attitude starting tomorrow. Li Wei was deeply moved. His experience was now impacting people all over the world. But the biggest change happened within Li Wei himself. His style of business negotiation changed dramatically. He no longer focused solely on ruthless efficiency. He began to think from the other party's perspective. Cost reduction is important, he would say, but protecting the jobs of all your employees is just as important. Let's find a way to achieve both. At first, his colleagues questioned this new approach. What happened to you in America, Li Wei? You're not yourself. But the results were astonishing. Proposals that considered the other side's perspective were embraced by more and more companies. Long-term, trust-based relationships were forged, and his rate of repeat business skyrocketed. 6 months later, Li Wei was promoted to Managing Director of North American Operations. But what he was proudest of was something else. His video had become the catalyst for service improvements at airports worldwide. A level of service that came to be called the American standard greatly increased passenger satisfaction. Messages of thanks poured in from across the globe. Your video showed me how great America can be. I want to visit. You taught me what true consideration means. Today, Li Wei travels to the US several times a year. Beyond business, there is so much more he wants to learn from this country. The other day, he met Sarah again at DFW. Ms. Li, welcome back, she said, remembering him. That video of yours went global. I was just doing my job. It's so embarrassing. Li Wei replied from the heart. Sarah, what is just your job to you is something that changed the world. The caring heart of the American people is giving hope to people everywhere. And I want to be a part of that. As he walked through Dallas, divided by Fort Worth International Airport, Li Wei was filled with gratitude. He was grateful for the good fortune of his encounter with this side of America, and at the same time, deeply ashamed of his own arrogance just 1 year prior. Efficiency is important, but there is something even more important. A heart that thinks of others is what brings true success. This was the most profound lesson Li Wei learned from America. And now, he is on a mission to spread that lesson around the world. The story that began with a simple 10-second video continues to unfold, touching hearts across the globe to this very day.